Before I begin, I think I need to thank Dr. Sandeep for considering me to do this for the plastic surgery group. And I hope I do justice to that. And thank you, Dr. Lakshmi, for all the encouragement that you've given. So with that, I think I'll start on the topic. It's a little pathology oriented. Dr. Sandeep had specifically told me avoid poll questions, no questions for plastic surgery fellows. So I've scrapped all my questions. So it is purely going to be a pathology related topic, but a little bit of molecular and genetics added on to that. Yeah, can we move on to the next slide? Yeah, so before I start off on the topic proper, this is statutory warning for the plastic surgeons. Okay. And when I say bench to bedside, don't get excited. You have to sit right there and you have to lift yourself with wound healing and don't tuck yourself away. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah, so basically it said that you need to get back into the past. Like you need to find out what exactly happens before we actually move into finding out what is happening in the present. So with that, can I have the next slide, please? Yeah, so basically, if you look at the art of healing, it's been there from time immemorial. And this is a picture which shows a chimpanzee eating leaves. And it's supposed to be medicinal quality of the leaves were understood even then. This is from Homer's Iliad, where Achilles and Patroclus were supposed to have been physicians at that era, and our own Sushruta. I think you have a Sushruta statue in Dr. Sandeep's poster. He was called the father of surgery. And of course, I think a lot of us have really lived on obelisks and asterisks with obelisks in the magic potion. So basically, it says that you need to practice it intelligently because a lot of things in the environment also that shapes what happens in your wound healing process. Next slide, please. Yeah, and for those of you who are interested in reading more about it, there's this beautiful book. He's a pathologist, Guido Magno, an Italian pathologist, and it talks about from the historic times what has happened to the healing and to what is happening currently. Next, please. And this is something that we've learned from the lower forms of life because we know that there is complete regeneration in certain lower forms of life. And the classic example quoted is that of the salamanders, right? So you know that it can completely regenerate itself. But as we come to the higher forms of life, because our body is far more complex, the regeneration doesn't happen in its entirety. So there is something like you have, okay, liver regenerates, the pancreas regenerates, there are certain organs which regenerate, but some organs don't. Next slide, please. Yeah, can you just do one more click on that? Yeah, so this will be the process involved. So you know that there are 8 SLOs for my topic. So it's also giving you an idea when you reach the 7th, you know, I'm ending. It's going to end soon. So don't worry. So these SLOs are given because at the end of the lecture, you all should be able to at least understand what exactly happens. And these are the procedure that happens as part of wound healing. Can I have the next slide? Yeah, next, please. Yeah, so basically, if you want to define healing, it is either as resolution or it's repair. So resolution means you get it back into the pre-injury state. Whereas if it's repair, you are repairing it by using certain connective tissue metrics. So maybe what happens is it gets replaced by scar tissue. Next slide, please. So if you look at the cell cycle, basically your what are called as labile cells are cells that are continuously active within the cell cycle, which means that they continuously dividing. Whereas your stable cells are cells that remain in the G0 phase of the cell cycle, but when called upon can get back into the cell cycle. Permanent cells can never do that. Next slide, please. So a few examples for labile cells, you know that hematopoietic cells, which need constant regeneration, and your surface epithelia, which includes your skin, your gut epithelia, your respiratory system, all these are continuously regenerated. So they are all labile cells. Stable cells would be your liver, your pancreas, your smooth muscle cells. Those are cells which, when called upon, can regenerate, which is why you have liver transplantations, pancreatic transplantations. And then the permanent cells, which are your nerve cells, cardiac muscle cells, and the skeletal muscle cells. Next slide, please. So basically, what is the ultimate aim? The ultimate aim as part of any healing is to restore the integrity of the barrier. So that is the purpose of healing. Next, please. Yeah, the next one. So basically, if you look at the process of healing, it involves hemostasis. So hemostasis is obviously when there is an injury, there is bleeding. So you have a primary platelet plug, right? And once the primary platelet plug can control the bleeding, maybe it stops there. But if it's bleeding in excess of that, then you call upon the coagulation pathway also. So hemostasis followed by inflammation, followed by proliferation, and culminating with remodeling. Now, when we look at these processes, it is not that they are sequential processes, but of course overlapping. So if you look at this graph, can I have the next slide, please? Yeah. So if you look at this graph, basically you can see that the entire process, though sequential, has got overlapping phases. So you have inflammation and proliferation, which begins alongside inflammation. Again, reepithelialization, which is happening, and then you have the remodeling phase that happens. So sequential overlapping phases of wound healing. Next slide, please. Yeah, so if you look at, can I have one more click on that? Yeah, one more click. Because all these are animated. Okay, fine. So basically it starts out with a platelet plug, and if required, the coagulation cascade is called upon. And in pathology, as far as body processes go, there is a link up between various cascades. Though we kind of segregate each of these cascades, there is a link up between most of these cascades. The coagulation cascade will call upon the complement. Now the complements are needed because most often your injurious agents are microbial organisms, and for that, acting against them, you require your complement cascade. Can I have the next slide? So this is just a chart for the plastic surgeons. I don't think this much of detailing is needed, but just realize that somewhere here there is a link up, which is the link up between the coagulation and the complement pathway. The complement pathway ultimately resulting in what is called as the MAC, or the membrane attack complex, which causes the lysis of the microbial organism. Can I have the next slide? Yeah, the next one. So that was the hemostatic phase. Then you come on to the inflammation. So usually when you talk about inflammation, you have the two wings of inflammation. One is the, or rather what is called as the immune mechanism. One is the innate that you're born with, and the other one is the adaptive or the acquired one that you acquire over time, right? So when you talk about injury, you're mostly concentrating on the innate immunity, because those are the cells that are the ones to be called first. So when you have the innate immunity, the adaptive immunity, there is a bridge between innate and adaptive, and if required, the backup adaptive immunity is called upon. So if you look at it, most of it will be centered around innate immune cells, which are mostly your neutrophils and macrophages. Can I have the next slide? Yeah, so this is the process of inflammation, wherein when an injury occurs and there is something that enters your body, the body reacts. And the body reacts first by vascular events. So basically, you need to have vascular dilatation to release cells from the vessels into the extracellular space. So vascular events followed by the cellular events. And the cellular events are the neutrophils which were tracking along the center of the vessel start marginating to the periphery. Then they roll and they find spaces between endothelial cells. They squeeze out to the gaps between the endothelial cells, which is called diapedesis. And then they transmigrate along a chemotactic gradient. So there are chemotactic factors ensuring that the neutrophils reach the site of injury. So that's the entire process of inflammation, where you have vascular events and cellular events. Next slide, please. Yeah, so if you look at this particular chart, it says acute inflammatory response, which can either resolve, or if it doesn't resolve, then it moves on to a chronic inflammatory process. So basically, from the vessel, the neutrophils come out, the neutrophils come and perform their various functions. But as far as the body goes, there are things which stimulate the neutrophils, and when their function is done, there are things which dampen the effect of neutrophils, which is what happens, and your neutrophil gets apoptosis, or it is taken up by the macrophage, which is called efferocytosis, finally resulting in resolution of the inflammation. But any of these processes goes awry, then you have what is called as chronic inflammation, which we'll come to later, and what happens when you have chronic inflammation. So basically, this is the whole process where you have the innate immune mechanisms coming into the picture. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah, two more clicks, I think, or one click would do. Yeah, fine. So So basically what happens is when the innate immune mechanisms cannot withstand the effect and they're not able to do their job, then the adaptive immunity comes into the picture. And these are some of the cells which are involved in innate immunity, which bridge they come as a bridge over troubled waters where the immune system is unable to manage with innate immunity alone, resulting in adaptive immunity. I've taken this because there is something, and I have the next slide. In your adaptive immunity, you have basically the B cells and the T cells. And the T cells are divided into helper T cells, cytotoxic or killer T cells, and regulatory T cells. So there is a lot of role, or rather there is a lot of work going on on regulatory T cells, and they're supposed to play a very important role in reparative phenomena. And a lot of things within the Treg cells or upregulation of Treg cells are being now tried to stimulate the process of repair. Okay, so that finishes your inflammation. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah, so basically we spoke about hemostasis followed by inflammation. And now once that inflammatory response is kind of curbed the infection or the injury, now it's time to let go of inflammation and move on to proliferation, because at the end of the day, the purpose is to maintain the integrity of the barrier. Can I have the next slide, please? So that therein comes the proliferation step. Now in proliferation, what all are involved? If you look at it, you have macrophages, you have the microenvironment, which is very, very important these days. You have the lipid mediators, which are your prostaglandins, your prostacyclins, etc. You have the redox signals, which is your free radicals. You have negative regulators, your transcription factors, epigenetic implying that they are not related to the DNA, but there's mechanisms which can alter the DNA because they are mechanisms which affect the histones around which the DNA is wrapped, and what are called as microRNA. I'll come to this in brief detail. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah, so if you look at macrophages in the inflammatory phase, it is M1 macrophage that predominates. So you can look, if you watch carefully, you can see that the M1 is a pro-inflammatory macrophage, and the job there is phagocytosis, clearance of debris, production of pro-inflammatory factors. Once that job is done, the body senses that now these macrophages need to be converted to reparative macrophages, otherwise called the M2 macrophages. So you can see that this switch occurs with the change in the cytokine profile. So certain cytokines will cause the M1 macrophage formation, certain cytokines will cause the M2 phenotype. And ultimately, when you have a reparative phenotype, it is proliferation. So the switch between the M1 to the M2 is one of the factors that results in termination of inflammation and movement to proliferation. Next one, please. Yeah, so these are some of the activities as far as macrophages go. So they are involved in phagocytosis, debridement, recruitment activation, matrix synthesis, and angiogenesis. Next slide, please. And of course, can I have the next slide? Of course, your microenvironment. The microenvironment is very important because your cells live in an extracellular environment, and all the extracellular molecules which forms your mesenchyme is very, very important as far as wound healing, or for that matter, any process in the body goes. And that is where your myofibroblasts come into the picture, where the fibroblast acquires myoid properties or contractile properties and becomes the myofibroblast, secreting a lot of matrix metalloproteinases, growth factors, etc. Can I have the next one, please? Yeah, and then of course the lipid mediator. So basically you have the membrane phospholipids which get split into the various lipid mediators. Next slide, please. And this is just to show you a pathway where the green is the cyclooxygenase, which results in prostaglandins. Then you have the leukotrienes, right? And then you have the cytochromes, which result in your hydroxy icosa tetraenoic acid. All of, so what is marked out in red, what is marked out in green, what is marked out in purple are different pathways culminating in certain molecules, all of which are required in this transition from inflammation to proliferation. Can I have the next slide? So if you look at it, this particular chart shows that there are certain molecules, certain lipid mediators which are involved in the inflammatory phase. Then you have certain which are involved in the proliferation phase and others which are involved in the remodeling phase. So it is basically what molecule that comes into the picture is what decides what is the phase that this particular thing is going into. Next one, please. And then you have the redox molecules, or what is called as the redox potential. Next slide. Yeah. So if you look at the redox potential, it says that as you move towards a reduced phenotype, it is proliferation, quiescence, and to a certain extent differentiation. But once you're moving towards the oxidized phase, then the cells undergo apoptosis and necrosis, right? So basically, this is a free radical mediated injury. So during inflammation, you have free radicals getting formed, and those free radicals mediate the inflammatory process. But when that needs to be quietened down, you have reduction events that happen, which would favor the proliferation. And there are so many enzymes involved in this switch between the redox potential. Can I have the next slide, please? And these are some of the activities as far as your oxygen-free radicals are concerned. You can see that they are involved in every single process. That is, as part of inflammation, as part of cell proliferation, and angiogenesis. So they play a very important role in the entire process of wound healing. But depending on their oxidation status and their reduction status, the roles are reversed. Next slide, please. And then you have what are called as the toll-like receptors. So basically, toll is the meaning of toll is a gate, right? Your toll gate. So basically, you have toll-like receptors which allow the entry of certain molecules. So there are specific toll-like receptors which allow certain molecules. So they basically recognize your bacterial peptides, bacterial lipopolysaccharides, etc., and are involved as part of the innate immunity. And once these are recognized, then as happens in every cell, the entire process is a signal transduction process. That is, from the membrane, there is a glided. There's some disturbance.
Mohan sir, I think your mic is on. Mohan sir. Yeah, please switch off your mic. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so the toll-like receptors function as part of innate immunity. So you go on to signal transduction. So basically from the membrane into the cytoplasm, and from there you have transcription factors which move into the nucleus to stimulate synthesis or to repress the synthesis. So what you can do over here is when you want the inflammation to switch to proliferation, you block these TLRs, or what are called as the toll-like receptors, with soluble molecules. So they get blocked and the process shifts from inflammation to proliferation. Can I have the next slide? Yeah, the next one. And you have transcription factors. So finally, it culminates in transcription factors which go into the nucleus. They walk into the nucleus, and then from there, they allow the reepithelialization, but they dampen the inflammation, they allow granulation tissue, they allow angiogenesis. Next slide. Yeah, next one. And what are called as your microRNAs. So microRNAs are small RNAs which are around between 20 to 22 nucleotides long, and they are non-coding RNAs. So what they do is they come and attach themselves to coding RNAs. So basically they stop the transcription as well as the translation. So it's actually a post-translational modification. They come and attach themselves to the coding RNAs and prevent translation. So basically they're gene repressors. So these are some of the molecules, some of the cells that are involved in the switch between inflammation to proliferation. Can I have the next slide? And these, we're not going through the list, but you can see that there are so many microRNAs that are described, and each of these perform a certain function. So it can either be switching off inflammation and promoting keratinocyte growth, or it could be angiogenesis, or it could be fibroblast proliferation, depending on what is the microRNA that gets produced. And then you have, when you have proliferation, the aim is to cover up the tissue, restores vasculature, And the material that is formed is what is called as granulation tissue. And two people to be remembered in this context, one is John Hunter, the other one is Alexis Carrel. John Hunter known for his work on inflammation, Alexis Carrel on vascular suturing. Can I have the next slide, please? So this is just to tell you what happens. So you have an injury, there is a defect in that area, there is a platelet plug that gets formed, and then you have the inflammatory cells moving in to clear the injurious agent. You have a lot of cytokines, interleukins, tumor necrosis factors, chemokines coming into the picture to promote inflammation. And slowly from there, the switch happens. Can I have the next slide? Yeah, the switch happens, and then you have angiogenetic processes. So if you look at it, it forms from pre-existing endothelial cells where you have the stem cell population, or you can have bone marrow derived cells. So it forms a solid cord first, and then it forms a lumen within the solid cord. And for endothelial formation, first the pericyte needs to be disintegrated. So initially the pericyte gets detached, and you have what is called as a tip cell and the stalk cell. So it forms a stalk and a tip. It forms a solid cord, grows out as a linear thing, forms a lumina within, and then the pericyte comes back to line the vessel. So once the pericyte comes and lines the vessel, angiogenesis stops, because that is all that is needed. So there is a very beautifully orchestrated process starting from with proliferation of the stem cells, forming a solid cord, luminizing itself, and then having the pericyte coming and attaching to it. Can I have the next slide? And then you have the matrix. So you have an interstitial matrix, a basement membrane matrix, a fibrin clot matrix, and a granulation tissue matrix. Now, just so that you know, each one is composed of varying components. So depending on the components, you can differentiate between a dermal interstitial matrix, a basement membrane matrix, a fibrin matrix, and a granulation tissue matrix. Next slide, please. And when you have growth factor release, it is said that it is again a very well orchestrated. It's not that they just released out. They are released, but they're sequestered at various stages, and they're very carefully taken in such a way that there is nothing that happens in excess of what is needed. So there is a sequestration before they act and before they do their function. So there is a beautifully orchestrated, well coordinated program when the entire wound healing process happens. Next slide, please. And of course, when you have to have reepithelialization, you need to have something that can regenerate. So you have the stem cells, which are usually found in the hair bulge. Those stem cells will regenerate. Can I have the next slide? Yeah. So this is just a picture showing granulation tissue. So you can see this is the skin. It's from a case where there was an ulcer. This is the skin. That's the epidermis. There is a defect in the epidermis. And can you see this area here? You can see that this entire thing is granulation tissue. So you can see that. Can you just, I don't know where this one, can you just try one more click on this? Yeah. And in this particular case, for the plastic surgery people, this is a cytomegaloviral inclusion. So this was a person who was having a non-healing ulcer, and this particular cytomegaloviral inclusion, there was one cytomegaloviral inclusion that was found amidst this granulation tissue. So probably that must have been why it was non-healing. Can I have one more click on this side? And this was somebody again with an ulcer, non-healing ulcer. There is granulation tissue here. And what you can see here are fungal hyphae. So he was having a fungal infection, again probably responsible for the non-healing wound. So you need to look at other factors which could be responsible for the non-healing aspect of the wound. Can I have the next slide? So this is just to tell you that we had seen this graph earlier, just to tell you that it is an overlapping sequential process, and it is only when reepithelialization is almost done that remodeling starts. So remodeling, the turning point for remodeling or the start of remodeling is when reepithelialization ends, which means that the barrier integrity is ensured. Can I have the next slide? And as part of remodeling, you have resorption of type 3 collagen and replacement with type 1, which is much more stronger and has got more tensile strength. and reorientation of the collagen fibers. So all this happens as part of proliferation. And then you have remodeling, where there is a little bit of changes that occur so that the tensile strength is good enough. Next slide, please. And there is a lot of crosstalk between lot of these cells, lot of these molecules, which is responsible for this particular movement from inflammation to proliferation to remodeling. Next, please. And in proliferation, you need the angiogenic switches to be turned on. In remodeling, they have to be turned off. So you can see that there are activators which turn on the switch, activators which turn off the switch. Next one. And of course, your myofibroblasts. So myofibroblasts are derived from fibroblasts, but they are smooth. They have smooth muscle properties, and their proliferative capacity is low, but their metabolic activity, biomechanical activity, and sensitivity to apoptosis is much more than the ordinary fibroblasts. Can I have the next slide? Yeah. So this is actually from a gallbladder case. And you can see that this is the gallbladder. There was an acute cholecystitis episode with perforation. And you can see that there is a reparative processes happening in the gallbladder wall. And these are your myofibroblastic cells. So they acquire contractile properties, which is, and morphologically, they look like very intensely eosinophilic polygonal kind of cells with nucleus having a very prominent nucleolus. As you can see over here, the red dot here signifies the nucleus, a very active kind of cells. That is your myofibroblast. Next slide, please. So if you look at, this is again a table telling you that you have bone marrow derived stem cells, you have tissue stem cells, and you have mesenchymal stem cells. So they are very important because if you need something to regenerate, you need to have a stem cell which has got proliferative capacity as well as differentiation ability. So these have to happen if you need to have regeneration happening. Can I have the next slide? And if you look at the mesenchymal stem cells, you can see that they have various roles. One is recruitment of endogenous stem cells, increases the M2 macrophages, increases angiogenesis, decreases inflammatory. So basically, they play a role in proliferation followed by remodeling. So mesenchymal stem cells play a very important role, as do your epithelial stem cells. Next slide, please. And this is just a chart, or rather a table. It's a picturesque representation of what happens with a labile cell or a permanent cell. In a permanent cell, you can only have scar formation. In a labile cell, it can regenerate to its pre-injury state. Next slide, please.